All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ESSER annual reporting webinar for the Phase II data collection. My name is Megan Williams, and I am the ESSER grant manager at OSSI. Um, and I have some of my team members also on this call. And so we'll be supporting you all throughout your ESSER reporting activities. So thank you for attending. For today's agenda, we're going to go over the timeline for the ESSER reporting for Phase 2. Keep in mind for this fiscal year, we'll be reporting on FY23 expenditures. So that's any expenditures or any items that you use ESSER funds on between October 1, 2022 to September 30th of 2023. We're also going to walk through the ESSER 2 data collection requirements. There are two new requirements. One is reporting ESSER expenditures by activity, and then the other one is reporting the ESSER 3 mandatory requirement expenditures, so that evidence-based intervention mandatory set-aside, the 20%, you'll be reporting the expenditures by activity. We'll also review the ESSER 2 reporting template, and then we'll provide a list of resources that you all can access while you're completing your data collection. So just a background on the ESSER recovery funding. So as many of you may know, we awarded a total of $540 million to LEAs through ESSER 1, CARES, ESSER 2, CRISA, and then ESSER 3 ARP. So as a condition of you all receiving these ESSER funds, we are required, and you all are required to report to financial data for ESSER to the Department of Education. And the way you all report that is through us, in which we collect that information through this ESSER reporting data collection. So this webinar is going to focus on reporting for the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act for elementary and secondary school relief. It is a very long title, but you all may know it as ESSER 2. And then also the American Rescue Plan Act for elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, which is also known as ESSER 3 ARP. So you're reporting on funds, like I said, for FY23. Okay. Just to kind of give you all a roadmap of where we are and what our timeline is going to look like. As you know, the past 2 weeks, you all reported your phase 1 data collection. That window closed last Friday. So we're kind of in this little limbo phase between the January activities going into February. The phase 2 data collection will open on this upcoming Monday, February 5th, and that will be due February 16th. So it'll be a 2-week window. Um, there is also a third phase this year, which may have taken some of you by surprise. This has not been something that we've done in the past. There are some new collection pieces that Department of Ed wants us to collect from LEAs. And because that data collection is brand new, we are giving 3 weeks for that submission window. So that will open on February 19th and it will close on March 8th. Then in April, our team, between March and April, I would say, our team will review all of the information that you've submitted. We will identify if there seems to be any inconsistencies across our system, which is EGMS, and any of the data that you all submitted or any other data collections that we have. We'll then reach out and request for you all to make any corrections or adjustments as necessary. And this year we are giving more time for corrections. And then in May is when we will actually submit the information to Department of Ed. Okay. So these are some good to knows for you all as far as actions that the LEA will take. This is kind of just more in depth of what I just went over. So the data collection for phase 2 is going to be February 5th through the 16th. You all will download your reimbursement information from the CLIC application, and you'll use that information to populate your phase 2 templates. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in upcoming slides. Then, like I said, from February 19th to March 8th, that will be the Phase 3 data collection. This Phase 3 data collection is where you're going to be reporting on FTE staff data and then also data on the students that participated in interventions using ESSER funds. That upload will also take place in the IDES system as well. And then March 25th through April 5th is when you all will have when the corrections window will take place. We'll reach out to you all. Like I said, if we see any inconsistencies, you'll have the opportunity to re-upload in the amended Phase 1, Phase 2, or Phase 3 templates. And then you'll complete your final review of all your data. And the certification date is going to take place on April 15th. And I just want to highlight on the certification date, keep in mind that we only open the certification window on that date between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. So it's imperative that you make sure whoever is authorized, your authorized LEA leader, whether that's your head of school or principal, whoever that may be, if you can just confirm that they have the correct designation in IDS. I know this has been a tricky issue for a lot of LEAs. So I would say take that time now. Finding out that they cannot certify on April 15th will really jeopardize OSSI being able to submit this information on time. So just make sure you check those designations ahead of time. Okay. Okay, so let's go into the Phase 2 reporting requirements. So the Phase 2 reporting is going to encompass these three elements. You'll be reporting expenditure data by the USAID expenditure categories. Like I said, OSSI will provide your expenditure data from EGMS, and that'll be available in the CLIC application. You'll also need to take a look at the student enrollment and FTE data. So this was information that you all have submitted and have certified. So you just want to make sure the information that you've certified through these data collections matches what we also have in our CLIC application. And we'll talk about that a little bit more forthcoming. And then you're also going to include in this reporting collection planned uses of your remaining ESSER funds. So keep in mind, ESSER 1 ended 2 years ago at this point. ESSER 2 ended this past September. So you'll only be reporting on your remaining use of funds for ESSER 3, and that'll be by percentages. And essentially it's asking, how do you plan to use this money for FY24? So you may have already started obligating some of this or filling out your grant application. So you will use that information essentially to tell us how you plan to use it in this final year. Okay. For Phase 2, LEAs must report their ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 expenditures by the following. So we have these spending categories that Ed has determined that we should report our information by. And so those spending categories are over here to the left. So it's addressing physical health and safety, meeting students' academic, social, emotional, and other needs. This excludes mental health supports. You'll then report mental health supports for both staff, for students and staff, and then operational continuity and other allowed uses, and then that ESSER 3R mandatory requirement. The components that are new, the spending categories have not changed. However, for each spending category, for instance, addressing physical health and safety, last year you only reported those expenditures by cost type or object. So salaries and benefits, professional services, supplies and materials, and so forth. You will continue to report that same information. However, you will also be required to report expenditures in those same spending categories by the activities as well. And we'll go through some examples of what those activities will be. Um, and then take a look at the last item down here, ESSER 3 ARP mandatory requirement. This probably seems familiar to a lot of you, and it should because it was included in the Phase 1 reporting last year. You were required to report true false statements. So, did you use your 20% set aside on tutoring services or curriculum, true or false? For this year, you're actually going to include the dollar amount. So you'll be reporting those expenditures and not just true false statements, but the categories themselves have not changed. I see a couple of questions in the chat. I will get to those towards the end, but feel free to keep adding if anything comes up as we go through the slides. Okay. So just a quick overview of those new reporting requirements. ESSER expenditures by activities. Like I said before, you'll not only report by cost type, but also by the specific activity. So examples of these activities could be, did you spend money on cleaning and sanitization supplies, tutoring, curriculum, etc. And it'll be as part of those same spending categories. So addressing physical health and safety and so forth. Um, For expenditures by cost type and expenditures by activity, it's capturing the same information about the same subgrant expenditures. You're just reporting them in different ways. So with that being said, the sum of your ESSER expenditures across your cost types should also equal the sum across activities for each spending category. So for example, the total expenditures that you have for physical health and safety for ESSER 3 for cost types should also equal the total expenditures for physical health and safety for ESSER 3 across activities. And just note, please report your expenditures only once. There are some validations that are built in, and so if your sheets or your expenditures total more than what you actually reimburse for in EGMS, it will reject your template. So just make sure you're only accounting for each expenditure once within the cost type file tab and once within the activities tab. And then for the ESSER 3 mandatory requirement expenditures by activities. So like I said earlier, LEAs are going to report the expenditures for activities and interventions mandated by the ESSER 3 for evidence-based interventions. So remember, this was true false last year. It's not going to be true false this year. It will be your expenditures. Okay. So the phase 2 reporting by activity, this is just a quick walkthrough. So within the template, if you remember last year, if you worked on this data collection, there are going to be separate lines for each subgrant. So ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and then also the ESSER 3 ARP evidence-based interventions only. From there, you'll be reporting across each of these US Ed spending categories. And then within each of these spending categories is where you're going to be reporting on the expenditures for the activities. So I'll pause here for a second so you all can take a look at an idea of some of the activities that we'll be expecting you all to report those expenditures on. Okay. And then for ESSER 3, the ARP mandatory requirement is just keep in mind whenever you see ESSER 3 ARP mandatory requirement, we're talking about the evidence-based interventions. I know sometimes it can be a little confusing, but just know that that's what we're referencing. So you'll only be reporting on expenditures that were tied to those evidence-based interventions across these different activities. And I'll pause here so you can take a look. And these will look familiar because these were the true false from last year. Okay. And then this is just an overview of probably what you're most familiar with, what you had to report on last year. So same as what I showed you 2 slides ago, you'll be reporting by the 3 subgrants. So ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and then within ESSER 3, anything that was tied to those evidence-based interventions. And then from there, you'll still be reporting across those same US Ed spending categories. And within those categories, you'll be reporting cost type. So salaries, benefits, professional services, supplies, materials, and so forth. Okay. So I'm going to share a snapshot of what the ESSER EGMS expenditure sheets are going to look like in Click. So we're saving you all the headache of having to go into EGMS, go through all of your expenditures and reimbursement requests, and kind of save you time in filling out the template. All of that information has essentially been pulled into a Click application, which you will have access to this week. There are going to be 4 different spreadsheets you'll be looking at. ESSER 2, there will be a spreadsheet that will include all of your expenditures for salaries and benefits. And then all other spending categories will be in a separate sheet. So that's your professional services, supplies and materials, property, other objects. And then it'll be the same breakdown for ESSER 3. So it'll be a separate one for salaries and benefits, and then another sheet for all other EGMS spend categories. And we'll go through how you all can download your information. Okay, so like I said, the phase 2 reporting window opens on Monday. I highly encourage you all to not wait till Monday to start mapping your expenditures, um, because the information, it will be available in Click this week, hopefully by the end of day today. In the meantime, while you're waiting for the window to open, I would encourage you to start mapping your expenditures. So we have our ESSER budget codes and budget categories that are a part of the ESSER applications in EGMS. Unfortunately, the categories don't map one-to-one with the categories that Department of Ed is requiring us to report on. So to help you all out, we have created mapping tables that you all can use as a starting point to organize your expenditures. Um, there is an instructional guide that will be posted on OSSI's website. It should be up by tomorrow morning, that can also walk you through how to map your expenditures and start connecting those US Ed spending categories and the EGMS budget codes. Okay, so the phase 2 reporting for the expenditure data. So these are actions that you all will take once IDS becomes available on Monday. You'll download the phase 2 reporting template from IDS. Familiarize yourself with the template. Sorry, the template. Download the ESSER data sheets from Click into an Excel spreadsheet. So that's what I was talking about in the slide before, mapping those expenditures. And I'll show you all how to download that as an Excel file. You'll use the instructional guide to help you crosswalk your EGMS reimbursement data. So those EGMS budget codes with US Ed spending categories, cost types, and activities. And then in your IDS, when IDS opens that template you'll be downloading, you will be taking the sum of those various expenditures that you download from Click and put that information into your phase 2 to align with those required US Ed categories. This is just a screenshot of what the IDS portal will look like. by the time phase two opens, everyone should have whoever is designated as the LEA finance slash grants manager. That is the only person who can actually submit the template. So if you all are aware of any staff changes between now and Monday, please make those adjustments now because I don't want it to delay you all submitting your information timely. Um, if you have any additional questions or how to handle any credential issues, you can submit an Aussie support tool ticket, or you can also email the ESSER inbox, and the email is here, aussie.esser@dc.gov for any additional support. Okay, so once you're logged into IDS, at the top, you will see where it says entity. It should just say your LEA. Um, and then there is a collection drop down to the right. You're going to go to the ESSER Phase II collection. It'll be a list of collections. You want to make sure you're in ESSER Phase II. And then from there, you'll download the template. And then that will populate the template for you all to use. It'll download as an Excel file, and that's what you will be completing. Okay. So for the different categories, like I said, these are the spending categories that Ed has designated. So we're going to go through each one of these. So we're going to start with addressing physical health and safety. And just remember, each one of these spending categories has a new reporting requirement, and that is the activities. Okay, so once you've mapped all of your expenditures, LEAs must total the expenditures by cost type per grant for each spending activity. So you're going to look through your data. You'll filter in for ESSER 2 expenditures under meeting students' academic, social, emotional, and other needs. So make sure, that's why I said mapping your budget codes to see which of my expenditures fall under this category. And then from there, of those expenditures, how much of it was spent on supplies? How much of it was spent on salaries and benefits? And in the instructional guide, it'll tell you how to pull out that salaries and benefits portion. But that's essentially what you're doing. You're including the total amount of expenditures that was spent towards that particular budget category. Okay, so under addressing physical health and safety, when we talked about those activities that you'll be reporting on, these are some of the activities it may include. So air filters, PPE cleaning services. So if it's ventilation systems, assistance for meals with students, cleaning supplies, if there were any type of temporary classroom space to support social distancing. So you'll be going through your expenditures and determining, I would say, take a look at what the item is called, and then also take a look at the descriptions as well. And that information will also be available in your click data. So this is to give you an idea of what you should be including as far as activities. So addressing physical health and safety by activities. So this option set row here, row 6, that's going to tell you the type of permitted value for each one of these sales sheets. And everything should be numeric because you're reporting numbers. You'll refer to the 4 expenditure spreadsheets to complete this section. So those spreadsheets were the ESSER 2 salaries and benefits, ESSER 2 all other, ESSER 3 salaries and benefits, and ESSER 3 all others. One thing I want to highlight, there was a lot of confusion around this last year, is when you're reporting your expenditures for ESSER 3 and then your evidence-based interventions. So line 9 is where you'll report your ESSER 3 expenditures. And in the workbook, it actually says that, you just can't see it in the screenshot. And then row 10 is where you're going to report anything tied to the evidence-based interventions. If there's anything that is tied to an evidence-based intervention, it should be broken out and only included in line 10. Do not include it as part of line 9, even though it is from ESSER 3. Because what'll happen is you're essentially double counting those evidence-based interventions, and your upload will say failed. It won't be a successful upload. So for here, as you're going through your data, you're looking through your ESSER 2 files. Did you spend any ESSER 2 funds on building and facility upgrades, cleaning and sanitization supplies, and so forth? And you'll put that total dollar amount for any expenditures that may fall in those categories. And then the same steps for cost type. So I'll use the ESSER 2 example again. So ESSER 2, under addressing physical health and safety, instead of it being by the activity, how much did you spend on salaries, benefits, and so forth? Okay, so let's move into meeting students' academic, social, emotional, and other needs. So this is a list of the different type of activities that can be included under this spending category. So these are your after-school programs, if you provided Wi-Fi hotspots, any type of high dosage tutoring or devices, computer, tablets, etc. So once again, when you're reporting by the activities, you're going to be looking how much money you spent on those specific type of activities. So here for this particular category, it wants to know either in ESSER 2, ESSER 3, or ESSER 3 evidence-based interventions, how much was spent on extended learning, tutoring, did you hire additional staffing, or activities to identify or respond to the unique needs of students? Was there any universal screenings? And so that's why I said really take a look at those descriptions and the name of your actual expenditures versus budget codes at this point, because we're looking at specific activities. If no funds were spent for an activity, just enter 0. Don't leave it blank, include 0. And so as you'll see here to the left, at the end of each section, the total amount expended for that particular category will be automatically calculated. So it's going to total across in all of these different activities. We still want to know how much you spent total on ESSER 2 for meeting students' academic, social, emotional, and other needs. So that'll total in this column here. And then the same for cost type, once again, you'll go through your sheet and you're going to look for budget across those budget codes versus the activities. Just to make a connection to what I was explaining earlier. So going back to totaling across the amount expended for meeting students or any of the spending categories, the amount spent on mental health supports for students and staff, say for ESSER 2 on your cost type, this number should also match the total number in your activities tab as well. Because remember, it's the same information, just diced different ways. Okay, so let's go into mental health supports for students and staff. And example of the activities that it may include: mental health professional services, licensed counselor, social worker, mindfulness app for staff. This is also something I want to note. There was a little confusion last year. When you're talking about mental health supports, remember this category, the differentiation between that and social emotional supports is that they're provided by licensed mental health professionals. So it's more so the credentials of the person providing the service. And that's how you'll know who to include in the mental health supports for students and staff and the meeting the social emotional needs of students. Okay. Under activities for this particular category, there's only one. And so you'll just be telling us across each of the subgrants the total amount spent on additional staffing and or activities to assess and support the social emotional well-being, including mental health for students, educators, and or families. For cost type, you'll still, like I said, it's still the same information, but for those activities, essentially we're looking at salaries, benefits, supplies, materials, etc. Okay, operational continuity and other allowed uses. So the connection for this is essentially other when you are filling out your grant applications. So this type of activities are stipends for teacher retention, incentives regarding maybe teacher vaccinations, or stipends for extended learning staff. So yeah, it can also include any costs that were not described in any of the previous spending categories that were authorized by other grants as well. So McKinney-Vento, ESEA, IDEA, and so on. But remember, this is only with ESSER funds. So don't get thrown off when you see the other grants. We're still talking about activities that were paid for with ESSER funds. Okay. Um, so when you're reporting by activities, it's going to be those same kind of the same way that you've been doing the previous expenditures. You'll be reporting the total amount expended on activities, for instance, not described above that's authorized by McKinney-Vento, so related to homeless students, or section V here is related to students with disabilities. And so that's where you will include any of that information that may not have been included in any of the prior spending categories. And the same thing by cost type. Okay. Um, we'll go into the phase two reporting for planned uses of expenditures. So this is essentially asking, like I said earlier, how do you plan to use your remaining ESSER 3 funds for this year? You'll only be reporting this for ESSER 3 ARP, and you'll be including a percentage. All rows across must total to 100% essentially. So just make sure that you've accounted for 100% of the remaining funds percentage wise, or if you try to upload, you will have a failed upload. Okay. So we'll jump into the ESSER 3 mandatory requirement. So you're only going to complete this tab using your expenditures that are marked as evidence-based interventions. And the data that you download from Click will have a column where you can filter for things that were tied to evidence-based interventions. I'm going to pause for a second. I think someone wanted me to repeat something. Let me see. I think it was Olivia. Hi, Olivia. Was it related to the prior slide? Yes. Okay. for the remaining use of funds, right? Okay. So just really quick. So for instance, you're really just recording however much money you have for remaining for FY24 for ESSER. You need to include percentage-wise how much of that you plan to spend on addressing physical health and safety, how much you plan to use it addressing meeting the social emotional needs of students or mental health or operational continuity. And what I was saying is if you're going to only use the remaining funds for these four categories, and you want to split it evenly across, it should be 25, 25, 25, 25. Everything needs to total to 100%. So you need to account for the percentage of all remaining funds. Okay. I hope that was helpful. If you have any additional questions, we can chat offline. Okay. So going back to the ESSER 3 mandatory requirement, like I said before, the click data has a column where you can filter for expenditures specifically tied to evidence-based interventions. You'll comb through that information and just include the expenditures across these different categories. So tutoring, additional classroom teachers, after-school programs. Um, I think this particular set of data is a little bit more straightforward than maybe the cost types and activities. So this may not take up as much of your time. Um, so it may be a good starting point if you want to start with the easy before things get a little trickier. Another part of this that was included in last year's data collection that has not changed this year was the impact statement. So LEAs were required to provide a statement around how the activities or interventions that you implemented for the 20% set aside, just describe how they address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19. Um, Including any major racial or ethnic groups, um, or any of the subgroups that your interventions were to support. And that is included in your evidence-based intervention form if you need to go back and kind of refresh your memory on the specific subgroup of students by the different interventions. So your statement should be included here. Should be less than 3,000 characters. If it is more, it will not be a successful upload and you'll need to adjust. Okay, so we've gone through how you're going to report your expenditures by cost type, how you report your expenditures by activities, and how you'll report your evidence-based intervention expenditures. You filled everything out, you're ready to upload. You're going to go back into IDS, make sure it's your LEA. It should be. If you see someone else's LEA, please reach out and let us know. You should not. So you'll see your LEA. Remember, under the collection dropdown, you want to go to ESSER Phase II, and then you'll hit the upload button and you'll upload your file. Going to go back to this really quick. Once you upload your file, if some of you saw with the phase one, if there seems to be any discrepancies, it will say failed. And then from there, you'll need to go back through your data and try to figure out, did you not account for expenditures? And make any adjustments. If you need any additional support when you're trying to correct a failed template, you can definitely reach out to me and my team and we can provide some one-on-one support for you all. Okay. For the phase two reporting student enrollment and FTE, so you're not going to be reporting on student enrollment and FTE data in the phase two. However, the information will be available for you to review. So the numbers in the enrollment and faculty and staff sheets should reconcile to the certified data that you previously had submitted to OSSE. So once again, going back to CLIC, that information will be available for you to download. and you'll need to bump that up against the certified submission that you submitted to OSSI earlier. If they don't match, you must submit an OSSI support tool ticket to have the data and click updated. We do have to report this information to Ed, so we do want to make sure it's accurate. So please take a look and reach out or submit that OSSI support tool ticket if that data does not match. Okay. So now we'll go into the phase 2 reporting supports and resources. So in the phase 2 template, the last tab, we have included detailed descriptions of each field that you'll be completing in the template. So if you have questions like, oh, it wants me to report the expenditures for this, but I don't know exactly what it's asking or what's the definition of this particular requirement, that information is available in the final tab, all the data elements and descriptions. So I would say start there first. If there's still any confusion, then reach out. We do have an instructional guide that will also assist you as you're walking through this information. It has been finalized. We should have that posted, I would say by midday tomorrow, but hopefully a little earlier. So please take a look at that as well as you're going through it. Definitely take a look and get familiar with it prior to the window opening on Monday if you or someone on your staff can. And then if you still have any questions, reach out to us. So providing support to you all, we will pre-populate as much as possible. Most of it is basically around providing you that expenditure information. Um, and then having a lot of the sums, kind of a lot of things auto-calculate, being able to have those data validations built in so you won't have to guess, did I include all of my expenditures? So we're trying to make this as reducing the burden as much as possible for you all. So we're having the webinar now. This is being recorded. It will be posted to OSSI's website. Please keep an eye out in the K-12 grants newsletter that goes out every other week. It will have updates, including upcoming deadlines and registration for the Phase 3 webinar. So please sign up for that as well. The Phase 2 user guide will also be posted on OSSI's website. We're trying to get that up by tomorrow. If you have any questions, like I said, reach out to the ESSER inbox. There is a certifying data instructional guide that will become available prior to the certification window opening. It's not on OSSI's website yet, but it will be available. All right, let's go into next steps. So, first step is downloading the instructional guides forthcoming. I think I've said this many times now. It'll be available tomorrow. Download your FY23 expenditure data from Click. That should be available by push to production by the end of the day today. Start mapping those expenditures. The instructional guide will show you how to map those expenditures. So mapping those EGMS budget codes to the Department of Ed spending categories. Review your student enrollment and FTE data. Make sure there are no discrepancies. If there are, submit the OSSI support tool ticket to get that reconciled. Submit the Phase 2 template and any FTE corrections by February 16th. If needed, resubmit the IDS template to resolve any OSSI change requests. That'll come a little bit later, but you'll need to do that by April 5th. And then the certification date, like I said, for all of your data is going to be April 15th. Okay. That concludes my presentation. I am going to kind of comb through the chat. If if you all can just bear with me and try to answer a few questions that we have.